It was a day that no human alive would ever forget, even if they weren't aware of it at the time. Across the galaxy, the Galactic Council gathered in its massive chambers, a place where species from hundreds of worlds met to make decisions about the future of countless civilizations. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling stretching miles above, with light filtering through from artificial suns high above. Every species had a seat, some grand and shiny, some modest and simple, depending on their influence and power. For centuries, humans had been observers in the council. They had sent diplomats, shared some scientific knowledge, and sometimes acted as mediators in disputes. They had never sought glory, never demanded recognition. Humans were a young species compared to the veterans of the council, but they had proven themselves capable, in small ways, scientifically clever, surprisingly adaptable, and fiercely resilient. Yet, despite all this, the council had made a shocking decision. The humans were officially declared substandard. According to the council, humans were too emotional, too unpredictable, and too violent to be trusted with advanced interstellar responsibilities. They were ranked at the bottom tier, beneath dozens of other species who had far less capability or experience. The announcement was made with the coldest efficiency. No fanfare, no explanation beyond the official report. The words themselves were like ice cutting through the history of human achievement. Substandard. Just one word. It did not describe them fairly. It belittled them, ignored everything they had accomplished. Back on Earth, the news spread like wildfire. At first, there was confusion. Scientists were in disbelief. Engineers shook their heads. Diplomats argued heatedly in their offices, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Across the globe, humans felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and shame. How could a species that had survived, grown, and thrived on a planet full of dangers be considered substandard? Every human felt the insult deeply. Soldiers who had trained for decades, risking their lives in defense of Earth, felt their dedication dismissed. Scientists who had spent their lives discovering new ways to make life better felt their hard work ignored. Even ordinary people, walking in cities, working in factories, teaching in schools, or farming the land, sensed the sting. The message was clear. According to the galaxy's elect, humans were failures. But humans were not the type to accept such judgments quietly. Not now, not ever. In homes, offices, laboratories, and secret bases, minds began to turn. Leaders discussed strategies, scientists sketched designs, and soldiers trained harder than ever. There was no public outcry of violence or destruction. Humans did not need to react with anger. Their minds were already moving, planning, and calculating. Across the council chambers, alien species celebrated their own cleverness. They assumed that the humans would crumble under the insult, that their pride would be wounded, that they would retreat further into insignificance. Few considered that humans were rarely motivated by fear or shame. Humans were motivated by challenge. When underestimated, they became sharper, faster, and far more creative. In the weeks following the announcement, Earth changed in quiet, almost invisible ways. Research labs that had been developing ordinary technology suddenly took bolder steps. Engineers experimented with engines and energy sources that had once been considered too unstable. Military strategists began testing defensive and offensive systems far beyond anything the Council had approved or anticipated. Yet, all of this happened under a veil of secrecy. Humans understood that the Council would watch closely, but they also knew that any reaction must be subtle. They did not want immediate confrontation. They did not want war. What they wanted was to show that the Council had made a terrible mistake, but on their terms. At the same time, public speeches were given. Carefully chosen words broadcast across Earth. Politicians and diplomats spoke of pride, resilience, and unity. "We will continue to grow," they said. "We will continue to explore. We will continue to learn. We will continue to survive. And one day, we will prove our place in the galaxy, not because anyone grants it to us, but because we earn it ourselves. These words were heard not only on Earth, but by every listening alien outpost in orbit. What most outsiders didn't see was the determination in human eyes. Across continents, humans began pushing limits. In Antarctica, researchers tested experimental energy fields. In the deserts, new engines roared for the first time, sending plumes of sand and dust into the sky. In orbit, satellites and small spacecraft conducted maneuvers that were impossible by conventional standards. Humans were quietly preparing, transforming frustration into purpose. And yet, amidst all this preparation, there was a calmness that alien species could never understand. Humans did not shout or make threats. They did not complain endlessly or beg for recognition. Instead, they acted silently, persistently, and with focus. Every lab experiment, every test flight, every strategic meeting was a step toward a future that the Council could not yet imagine. Some humans questioned whether they should respond at all. "They insulted us," one said in a quiet office filled with models of spacecraft and schematics. "Shouldn't we retaliate immediately?" But wiser minds shook their heads. Immediate retaliation would be reckless. They needed patience, planning, and intelligence. They would show their strength in a way that could not be ignored, misjudged, or forgotten. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, minor species whispered about humans. They had always been curious, always slightly in awe of Earth's inhabitants, but now curiosity turned into caution. Some diplomats tried to warn the Council that humans should not be underestimated. "Do not mistake their silence for weakness," one whispered during a private meeting. "They are young, yes, but they have survived more than most species ever will. They are dangerous in ways we cannot yet see." The Council, however, dismissed these warnings. They were confident in their judgment, convinced by decades of interstellar politics and diplomacy. They believed the humans would quietly fade back into insignificance. They were, in every way, completely wrong. As the months passed, humans continued their quiet work. Engineers developed engines that could bend space slightly, improving speed beyond what the Council considered safe. Scientists created shields that could absorb energy attacks, far stronger than anything previously tested. Even ordinary civilians played their part: technicians, programmers, and builders all contributed to the growing strength that humanity was quietly accumulating. But the most remarkable aspect was the mindset. Humans had always thrived under pressure, and this insult from the Council had placed immense pressure on them. Instead of fear, instead of panic, they had chosen determination. Every failure was a lesson, every obstacle a challenge to overcome. And every small success fueled the growing sense that something extraordinary was taking shape on Earth. Something that no alien species could yet imagine. By the end of the first year after the Council's declaration, Earth had transformed. Not visibly, not to outsiders, but in ways that mattered most. Humans had become faster thinkers, smarter engineers, and more disciplined strategists. Every project that had been shelved or dismissed before was now active, moving forward with precision and dedication. Humanity was no longer just reacting to the galaxy. They were preparing to define it on their own terms. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the Council chambers, a few astute observers began to notice patterns they didn't understand. Signals, unusual energy readings, and sudden, unexplained technological developments in human territory hinted that the species they had labeled as Substandard was growing in ways the Council had never predicted. Humans, meanwhile, continued their work in silence, waiting for the day when the galaxy would see their strength. They didn't need approval or recognition. They needed only themselves and their determination. And that determination was unlike anything the Council or any alien species had ever faced before, because humans did not simply survive. Humans did not simply adapt. Humans thrived under challenge, grew stronger under insult, and transformed frustration into unimaginable progress. And the Council, in all its confidence, had unknowingly sparked a quiet revolution on that would change the galaxy forever. After the shocking declaration from the Galactic Council, humans made a choice that surprised many. They stepped away from the galactic stage. Unlike what the Council expected, humans did not react with anger or immediate retaliation. They did not demand recognition or shout their defiance across space. Instead, they quietly pulled back from all major Council programs, projects, and collaborations. The decision was deliberate. Humans understood that they were being underestimated, that the Council believed they would shrink back and fade into insignificance. But humans had a different plan. They were not retreating because they were weak. They were retreating to grow stronger, to develop freely without limits, and to prepare for the day when they could show the galaxy exactly what they were capable of. Diplomatic teams left the Council chambers. Humans stopped sharing their latest scientific discoveries. Joint missions with other species were canceled. Trade programs, technological partnerships, and shared exploration initiatives were suspended. The Council watched these actions with a mix of smug satisfaction and mild annoyance. "See," they said, "humans accept their place. They know their limits." On Earth, however, the atmosphere was very different. Far from being discouraged, humans felt an awakening. Across the planet, scientists, engineers, pilots, and strategists realized that they were no longer bound by the expectations, rules, or restrictions of the Council. For the first time in decades, they had full freedom to innovate, to experiment, and to create in ways that would have been considered reckless or even forbidden by interstellar authorities. Research centers were buzzing with activity. Laboratories that had once focused on small, incremental improvements now tackled bold experiments. Energy sources that had been considered unstable were tested. Engines capable of breaking previous speed limitations were built. Artificial intelligence systems became more advanced, helping humans optimize and coordinate tasks on a scale that no alien species could yet imagine. Even in ordinary human industries, subtle changes were taking place. Factories worked more efficiently, with automated systems that could learn and improve over time. Communication networks expanded, linking research teams across continents with almost instantaneous precision. Every corner of Earth became a place of preparation, a silent stage being set for the future. Military operations also saw a quiet transformation. Training programs became more rigorous. Fleets were reorganized and upgraded. Humans no longer relied solely on conventional tactics. They experimented with new strategies, combining speed, agility, and precision in ways that would seem impossible to outsiders. Every soldier, pilot, and strategist understood that their actions today were investments in a future where the Council's judgment no longer mattered. Outside Earth, some alien species noticed these changes. Observers stationed near human territory reported unusual energy readings, strange patterns of activity, and subtle but unmistakable signs of rapid technological growth. They tried to warn the Council. Humans are not idle, some said. They are preparing, and what they are doing may surprise everyone. But the Council, still confident in their judgment, largely ignored these warnings. They assumed that humans' withdrawal from interstellar projects was proof of their inferiority. "They have no influence now," one counselor declared. "Let them focus on their primitive planet. They will not be a threat." What the Council did not understand was that humans thrived under challenge and adversity. Being underestimated fueled them. The Council's insult became a catalyst for unprecedented focus and creativity. Humans worked harder, thought deeper, and pushed further than ever before. Every experiment, every test, and every innovation was guided by the quiet but powerful determination to prove that their species was anything but substandard. Communities on Earth adapted too. Ordinary citizens became part of the larger effort, whether they realized it or not. Students in schools learned advanced concepts faster, encouraged by educators who knew that the future required brilliance. Engineers, programmers, and laborers collaborated in ways that blurred the line between work and discovery. Humans had become a species united by purpose, driven not by recognition, but by a shared vision of what they could achieve together. Meanwhile, the Council continued its business as usual, unaware of the slow, silent revolution taking place on Earth. Humans did not need their approval. In fact, they preferred to work without interference. Freed from the constraints of interstellar politics, they could innovate at a pace that would have been impossible under the watchful eyes of alien supervisors. The withdrawal also gave humans a strategic advantage. Without Council oversight, they could experiment with advanced technology that had previously been restricted. Ships were tested in secret, capable of speeds and maneuvers far beyond standard designs. Weapons, while developed for defense, became far more sophisticated than anything the Council expected. Every system was carefully refined, integrated with artificial intelligence, and tested in countless scenarios. At the same time, humans continued to monitor the galaxy. They were not isolationists. They watched the Council, studied other species, and observed threats that might emerge. They gathered intelligence quietly, never making their presence obvious, but ensuring that when the time came, they would have a clear understanding of the galaxy's state. Knowledge, they knew, was as important as strength. The Council's assumption that humans had retreated into insignificance was becoming increasingly dangerous. Other species still believed that humans were harmless, that their withdrawal signaled weakness. Minor skirmishes in the outer sectors went unchallenged by humans, further cementing this false perception. Humans appeared quiet and compliant on the surface, but beneath it, a powerful engine of innovation and strategy was building momentum. Even human culture shifted in subtle ways. Stories, art, and education emphasized resilience, creativity, and the importance of unity. Humans shared their values quietly with each other, the idea that survival depended not only on individual skill, but on collective effort. That innovation required courage, and that patience was often the most powerful weapon of all. The insult from the Council became a moral compass, guiding humans toward a future that no one else could yet imagine. Some humans questioned the path. They wondered if the Council's judgment might eventually provoke retaliation, or if isolation could be dangerous. Leaders, however, reassured them. They reminded everyone that true strength was measured over time, in preparation and persistence, not in immediate recognition. They believed that when the galaxy finally witnessed humanity's achievements, the outcome would speak louder than words ever could. Meanwhile, reports of human activity began to trickle into the interstellar community, unnoticed by the Council. Minor anomalies, energy spikes, and sudden technological advances were observed near Earth. Alien species speculated, whispered, and occasionally warned the Council. But the Council dismissed these warnings as irrelevant. They were convinced that humans had no real capacity to challenge their authority or influence galactic affairs. Humans, of course, were aware of these observations. They did not hide entirely. They allowed some signs of growth to be seen, but always in ways that misled the Council. Humans were masters of subtlety. They did not need to alarm the galaxy. They needed only to prepare, to build, and to grow until the day came when their actions would be undeniable. By the end of this period of quiet withdrawal, humanity had transformed in ways that were invisible to outsiders, but monumental in reality. Scientific knowledge had advanced by decades in mere months. Fleets were reorganized, tested, and ready for scenarios no one had imagined. Social systems, education, and infrastructure were all aligned with the goal of resilience and advancement. Humans had turned a moment of insult into a period of unprecedented growth, proving that being underestimated could become the greatest advantage of all. And still, humans remained calm and composed. No public display of anger, no boastful claims, no cries of defiance. They had chosen the patient path, the long road of preparation and mastery. Every action, every innovation, every strategic decision was a quiet step toward the moment when the galaxy would finally see the truth. The Council, meanwhile, remained blind. They had misjudged the humans completely. They assumed that withdrawal meant weakness, that isolation meant surrender. They could not comprehend that humans were using this time to grow stronger, to prepare, and to quietly take control of their own destiny. By the time the first hints of humanity's new capabilities would become visible to outsiders, the Council's arrogance would be their downfall. Humans were no longer just a minor species on the galactic map. They were becoming a force that no one could ignore. A species that had taken an insult and transformed it into an opportunity for unprecedented growth. And in that quiet period, while the Council smugly assumed they had the upper hand, humanity worked in silence, steadily and relentlessly, toward a future that would change the galaxy forever. Time passed, and humanity's quiet withdrawal from the Galactic Council began to show results in ways no one could have predicted. The decision to step back, to focus on their own growth, had given humans freedom, a freedom that they used in ways the Council could never imagine. While the galaxy assumed humans were fading into irrelevance, Earth became a hub of innovation, experimentation, and preparation for a future only humans could see. Science and technology advanced at an incredible pace. Humans tested engines capable of speeds previously thought impossible, devices that could bend space slightly, allowing ships to move faster than any Council records indicated. In laboratories and orbital stations, energy sources that had once been considered unstable were refined and stabilized. Artificial intelligence systems grew more advanced, learning faster and coordinating tasks across entire fleets and industries. Every step was calculated, precise, and yet bold a combination the Council had always underestimated in humans. Military development also took a quiet but revolutionary turn. Human fleets were rebuilt, reorganized, and upgraded. Ships were smaller, faster, and more durable than the Council's expectations. New defense systems were implemented, some capable of absorbing energy attacks far stronger than anything the Council had ever seen. Weapons were designed primarily for defense, but their precision, speed, and power made them terrifying. Every fleet exercise, every training drill, every test was a step toward mastery. Humans were becoming not just a competent species, but an unstoppable one. This period of growth was not limited to technology alone. Human society itself adapted in subtle ways. Education was reshaped to foster creativity, problem-solving, and critical thinking. Communities across Earth became more connected, using advanced communication networks to share knowledge instantly. Collaboration became second nature. Every citizen, whether in a lab, a factory, or a classroom, understood that they were contributing to something greater, a shared mission that went beyond individual achievement. Even ordinary people felt the changes. Farmers adopted new technologies to optimize production. Engineers worked on advanced projects that connected Earth's infrastructure with orbital stations. Pilots and astronauts trained in simulations far beyond standard procedures, preparing for scenarios that no other species had ever faced. Every person played a role, even unknowingly, in humanity's quiet preparation. Meanwhile, humans monitored the galaxy closely. They watched the Council's activities, observed neighboring species, and studied potential threats. They were careful, precise, and patient. Humans understood that knowledge was as important as power, and they gathered it silently, ensuring that when the time came, no one would be able to act against them without consequences. Alien observers began to notice strange patterns of activity around Earth, unusual energy signatures, new technologies being tested, and sudden, unexplained movements in orbital fleets caught their attention. Some speculated that humans were developing something extraordinary, but the Council dismissed these reports. They assumed humans were making minor advancements, nothing that could challenge the galaxy's balance. Humans, however, were aware that they were being watched. They did not try to hide everything, but they misled outsiders carefully. Demonstrations of capability were subtle, appearing harmless or experimental, while the real innovations remained hidden. Humans were masters of patience and strategy. They did not need to announce their progress. They only needed to perfect it. Over time, humans began to combine technology and strategy in ways that were unprecedented. Fleets trained in complex maneuvers that no other species had attempted. Ships moved with precision and coordination that made them appear almost alive, reacting to threats faster than any known system. Defense systems were integrated with artificial intelligence, capable of predicting attacks and adjusting instantly. Every innovation was tested repeatedly, ensuring reliability under extreme conditions. Scientific breakthroughs continued at a rapid pace. Energy sources that had once been theoretical became practical, powering ships, cities, and orbital stations with efficiency unmatched by any known civilization. Communication systems evolved, allowing instantaneous coordination across the planet and beyond. Humans were no longer just improving, they were redefining the limits of possibility. Even the human mindset changed. The insult from the Council had sparked a determination unlike anything before. Humans worked with focus, resilience, and creativity. Every challenge was an opportunity to learn, every obstacle a chance to grow stronger. They understood that their strength came not from the approval of others, but from their own effort and unity, not as humans advanced. Minor alien species began to take notice. Reports of strange energy fluctuations and unusual technological activity reached Council members, but they were largely ignored. The Council remained convinced that humans had accepted their substandard status. They assumed that the species was focused inward, incapable of influencing galactic affairs. They could not have been more wrong. Humans also improved their ability to observe and respond to threats. Advanced satellites, orbital stations, and hidden bases allowed them to monitor potential dangers across vast distances. They could anticipate problems, test solutions, and prepare responses far faster than any other species. Every observation was used to strengthen their systems, their fleets, and their strategies. Education and culture on Earth reinforced this growth. Children learned critical thinking and problem-solving from an early age. Innovation became a core value. Communities celebrated collaboration and resilience. Humans were preparing not just technologically, but mentally, emotionally, and socially for the challenges that the galaxy would eventually present. Despite all these developments, humans remained calm and patient. They did not rush, they did not flaunt their progress, and they did not let arrogance take root. Every achievement was measured, refined, and perfected. The galaxy believed that humans were still a minor species, but behind the scenes, humanity was quietly becoming something far greater. And while the Council remained blind to the scale of human progress, some aliens whispered warnings in secret. "Do not underestimate them," they said. "They are capable of more than you imagine." But the Council ignored these warnings. Confident in their judgment and their centuries of experience, by the end of this period, Earth had become a hub of unparalleled technological and strategic advancement. Ships, fleets, and defense systems were ready for challenges no one else could survive. Scientific breakthroughs had made humanity stronger, faster, and smarter. Social systems had aligned to support innovation and collaboration. Humans had taken an insult, transformed it into motivation, and quietly prepared for a future where they would no longer be underestimated. Even the slightest misstep by humans had been avoided. Every decision, every experiment, every deployment was calculated for maximum efficiency and reliability. Humans had become patient strategists, combining creativity, intelligence, and perseverance in a way that the Council could never predict. And while the galaxy believed humans were fading into irrelevance, Earth was quietly becoming a force that could not be ignored. Humanity had learned to convert disadvantage into advantage, insult into motivation, and underestimation into opportunity. They had chosen a path of preparation, patience, and precision, knowing that when the time came, the galaxy would witness their true power, and no species would ever doubt them again, not in the silence of their laboratories, in the quiet of orbital stations, and across cities teeming with innovation. Humans continued to grow. Every day brought new breakthroughs, new strategies, and new strength. And though the Council remained blind, one fact was undeniable. Humanity had changed, evolved, and prepared for a moment that would soon arrive. A moment when the galaxy would finally understand that labeling humans as substandard had been the gravest mistake in the Council's history. Years had passed since the Galactic Council declared humans substandard. Earth had quietly transformed into a hub of technological and strategic power. Humanity had grown stronger, smarter, and more capable than anyone could have imagined. Yet, throughout all this preparation, humans had not lost their sense of patience. They understood that true strength did not require immediate demonstration. It required timing, precision, and purpose. Then the first signs arrived that the galaxy had underestimated humans in the gravest way possible. A crisis erupted in a distant region, far from Earth, but within the Council's domain. An unknown hostile force appeared suddenly, attacking multiple planets, fleets, and colonies. It was fast, violent, and highly coordinated. Entire fleets of Council species were overwhelmed in hours. Communications were jammed, defenses fell, and chaos spread through the sector. The Council panicked. For decades, they had relied on their combined power, assuming no single species could be completely unprepared. Now, they realized just how wrong they had been. Desperate pleas for help were sent to every corner of the galaxy, including humanity. But humans were no longer obligated to respond. They had withdrawn from Council programs, reduced their diplomatic presence, and stopped sharing advanced technology. From the Council's perspective, humans had nothing to do with the situation. They were outsiders, quietly watching. Even so, humans were observing. From their orbital stations, hidden bases, and reconnaissance satellites, they gathered every piece of information available. They studied the attacks, analyzed the enemy's movements, and calculated the best ways to respond. There was no panic, no rushed decision-making. Humans had spent years preparing for scenarios exactly like this. 1. Every fleet, every weapon, and every defense system had been tested and refined for a moment like this. Council representatives debated among themselves. "We must call the humans," one said. "They are our only hope against this enemy." Another counselor hesitated. "They are substandard. They cannot be trusted. If we rely on them, we risk everything." But some began to remember what they had observed: the subtle improvements, the unusual activity around Earth, the whispers from minor species. Slowly, fear began to creep into the Council chambers. Could it be that they had been wrong about humans all along? Meanwhile, human leaders convened in a secure location on Earth. They reviewed the situation, studied the enemy, and discussed their options. There was no emotional reaction, No anger at the Council's earlier insult. No desire for revenge. Their focus was clear. The crisis threatened innocent lives, and humans could not allow unnecessary destruction. This was not about proving a point. It was about doing what they had prepared to do for years: defend when necessary, act with precision, and ensure survival. Plans were made quickly, but carefully. Human fleets were mobilized in secret, leaving Earth's orbit undetected by the Council and the hostile force. Each ship had been designed for agility, speed, and adaptability. The weapon systems were ready, refined over countless simulations. Artificial intelligence networks coordinated every move, predicting enemy actions and adjusting strategies in real time. Humans had trained for years to respond to threats precisely like this, and now the moment had arrived. Across the Council, species waited anxiously. Some still doubted humans could make a difference. Others, quietly, began to hope. The reports of strange energy signatures and unusual patterns near Earth had never seemed important. Now, those minor hints of activity gained new significance. Humans had been preparing all this time. They had not disappeared. They had been growing, learning, and waiting. As humans approached the crisis zone, their presence was felt immediately. The first wave of ships arrived with silent efficiency. They moved with coordination and speed that no one had seen before. Their ships were sleek, capable of maneuvers that seemed impossible. Their shields absorbed attacks that would have destroyed any other fleet. Their weapons were precise, hitting targets with devastating effect without unnecessary collateral damage. The enemy, confident in their initial victories, was shocked. They had assumed they faced only the weakened fleets of Council species. They had not anticipated humans. Now, every strike they launched was met with countermeasures they had never experienced. Human strategy was unlike anything they had faced before. It was as if the humans were always one step ahead, predicting every move, countering every attack, and exploiting weaknesses with uncanny precision. Council fleets watched in disbelief. Ships they had relied on to repel the enemy were no match for the humans' coordinated attacks. Every maneuver, every strike, every tactical decision made by humans demonstrated a level of mastery the Council had dismissed as impossible. Their assumptions about substandard humans were crumbling with every passing moment. Despite the chaos, humans maintained control. Communications were clear, strategies were executed flawlessly, and every action was intentional. There was no recklessness, no overconfidence, only preparation, intelligence, and precision. For the first time, the galaxy saw humans not as unpredictable, emotional, or substandard, but as disciplined, capable, and extraordinarily powerful. The enemy faltered. Their initial advantage evaporated as human ships neutralized their command. Centers disrupted their supply lines and eliminated their most dangerous units. Within hours, the crisis that had seemed insurmountable was under control. Humans had not only stabilized the situation, they had turned it in favor of the Council species that had once dismissed them. Council representatives were forced to admit the truth. They had misjudged humans completely. Every warning they had ignored, every assumption they had made, had been proven false. The species they had labeled as weak, unpredictable, and substandard had just saved them from complete annihilation. The word substandard now echoed as a bitter reminder of their mistake. And yet, humans did not gloat. They accepted no praise, demanded no reward, and made no political maneuvering. Their actions were calculated, precise, and effective, but entirely focused on the task at hand, protecting lives and restoring stability. Their restraint was another lesson for the galaxy. True power did not need to boast. It only needed to act. Minor species whispered among themselves. They had always known humans were resilient, adaptable, and clever. Now, they had undeniable proof. Humans were not just strong. They were disciplined, strategic, and capable of shaping the course of events on a galactic scale. The whispers spread quickly, sowing awe and fear. Humans were no longer to be underestimated. The crisis eventually subsided. The enemy retreated, defeated, and confused. Council species began to rebuild, their losses mitigated by the humans' intervention. Yet the lesson remained clear. The species they had labeled as substandard had acted decisively, effectively, and with a level of mastery that the Council could not deny. Even after the battle, humans returned quietly to their own space. They did not linger to bask in the Council's shock or gratitude. Their work was not about recognition. It was about readiness, precision, and principle. Every fleet returned to orbit, every station resumed normal operations, and Earth continued its quiet preparation. Humans had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, but they were not finished. Across the Council, panic and regret spread. The insult that had once seemed harmless now appeared reckless, even dangerous. The Council had assumed humans were irrelevant, but in reality, they had been preparing for exactly this moment. Humanity had turned an insult into motivation, a slight into preparation, and an underestimation into undeniable power. The galaxy had learned a lesson that no one would forget. Humans were patient, strategic, and relentless. Underestimation was their greatest advantage, and those who assumed weakness would soon regret it. And on Earth, humans continued their work, silently preparing for the next challenge, the next moment, the next opportunity to show the galaxy exactly who they were and why no species should ever dismiss them again. The moment humanity arrived in the crisis zone, the galaxy began to see a truth that no one had expected. Ships moved into the void with silent precision, fleets that had been trained, tested, and refined over years of preparation. Every ship, every weapon, every system was synchronized with an almost instinctive understanding of the battlefield. It was as if the humans were one living organism, reacting faster and more intelligently than any of the Council's fleets could imagine. Council commanders watched in disbelief. The species they had labeled as substandard, dismissed as unpredictable and weak, now dominated the battlefield with a level of skill and coordination that was breathtaking. Every maneuver, every defensive measure, and every offensive strike showed not just technology, but strategy, discipline, and intelligence beyond anything the Council had anticipated. Humans did not act recklessly. Their strikes were precise, calculated, and intentional. Enemy vessels were neutralized efficiently, their movements anticipated and countered before they could even execute them. Their shields absorbed attacks that would have obliterated other ships, and their weapons targeted critical systems without wasting energy. It was not chaos, it was control. Total control. The enemy forces, initially confident in their superiority, began to falter. They had expected the Council fleets to struggle, perhaps even collapse, but they had not anticipated humans. Now, every advance they attempted was met with resistance, often before it even began. Human fleets moved with such speed, precision, and coordination that the enemy could barely react. Their confidence turned to confusion, their strategy into desperation. Meanwhile, the Council fleets watched as their own forces were supplemented by humans. Initially, many officers were skeptical. Some believed humans might be reckless, unreliable, or even dangerous to allies. But as the battle progressed, it became clear that humans were neither reckless nor unpredictable. They were highly disciplined, incredibly adaptable, and capable of seeing the battlefield in ways that no other species could. The galaxy began to realize that humans had not only matched the enemy, they had outmatched them. Enemy command centers were struck with precision. Supply lines were severed, communication networks disrupted. Entire enemy formations collapsed under coordinated attacks. Humans did not act with unnecessary aggression. They acted with purpose, efficiency, and skill honed over years of preparation. Even minor species observing from nearby systems were in awe. For decades, humans had been dismissed as weak and unpredictable. Now, every action, every maneuver, every calculated strike demonstrated that humans were capable of far more than anyone had imagined. Whispers spread among fleets. This is what humans have been preparing. This is why we should never underestimate them. The enemy attempted to regroup, to mount a counteroffensive, but humans were always a step ahead. Advanced sensors detected every movement. AI-assisted targeting calculated responses in milliseconds, and fleets adjusted their positions instantly. Humans had turned a chaotic battlefield into an organized, controlled environment where they dictated the pace and outcome. Council commanders began to understand just how serious their misjudgment had been. The species they had insulted, the species they had called Substandard, was not only capable of intervening, they were dominating. The initial panic among council officers gave way to awe, then to fear. The realization that humans had prepared, learned, and evolved in secrecy shook them to their core. Despite the overwhelming display of power, humans did not linger for praise. Every strike, every maneuver, every calculation was focused on neutralizing the threat quickly and efficiently. They were not seeking recognition, and they did not gloat. They were here to achieve the mission and nothing more. Their restraint added to the awe and fear that spread across the battlefield. As the hours passed, the enemy's strength crumbled. Ships that had seemed unbeatable were neutralized with surgical precision. Command hierarchies collapsed as communications were disrupted. Forces that had terrorized entire sectors were disorganized and powerless in the face of human coordination and strategy. The battle, which had initially threatened the council species with devastation, was now turning into a decisive victory for humans and their allies. Council representatives could hardly comprehend what they were seeing. The species they had dismissed, humiliated, and labeled as weak had just changed the course of the battle. Their strategic insight, technological advancement, and disciplined execution were unmatched. For the first time, the Council had to confront the reality that they had been dead wrong about humans. Across the battlefield, minor species whispered among themselves, astonished by what they saw. The humans? They are nothing like we thought, one observer said. They are beyond anything the Council imagined. Another added, we underestimated them for too long. Now we see why they cannot be ignored. The enemy attempted a desperate retreat, but humans anticipated their moves. Advanced tracking systems, coordinated strikes, and predictive strategies made escape nearly impossible. Every movement was countered, every advantage nullified. The humans had turned every assumption against the enemy. What had begun as a chaotic and desperate situation became a controlled and decisive human victory. By the end of the battle, the scale of human power became undeniable. Ships that had once been considered advanced by Council standards had been outmatched. Entire enemy fleets were disabled or destroyed. Command structures that had seemed invincible were disrupted, and all of it had been accomplished with precision, discipline, and strategic foresight. The Council could no longer deny the truth. Humans were not substandard. They were not reckless or emotional in ways that made them dangerous. They were prepared, capable, and far more advanced in strategy, technology, and coordination than any Council species had expected. Their ability to combine intelligence, preparation, and execution was unprecedented. Even after the battle, humans did not linger for acknowledgement or reward. They returned to Earth quietly, without fanfare, without announcements, without arrogance. Their work was not done for recognition. It was done for principle, for precision, and for readiness. Every fleet, every station, every system returned to its position, fully prepared for whatever challenge might come next. Across the galaxy, Whispers spread like wildfire. Humans, they are not what we expected. We misjudged them. We should never underestimate them. The Council, who had once insulted humanity openly, now faced a reality that shook them to the core. They had been wrong, catastrophically wrong, and their arrogance had been exposed for all to see. Humanity had proven something greater than technology or weapons. They had demonstrated discipline, strategy, and restraint. They had acted decisively without arrogance. They had achieved mastery over the situation with calm precision. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy an invaluable lesson. True power is quiet, patient, and relentless. It does not need to boast, and it cannot be ignored. The victory was not just against the enemy. It was against the assumptions, prejudices, and underestimations of the entire galaxy. Humanity had taken the insult from the Council, the label of Substandard, and transformed it into motivation, preparation, and undeniable strength. They had waited patiently, grown quietly, and now, in one decisive action, they had shown the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The Council and every species watching would never forget the display of human power, intelligence, and discipline. For centuries, stories would be told of the moment humans arrived, not recklessly or angrily, but with precision, strategy, and strength that changed the course of history. And though humans had not sought glory or recognition, their actions spoke louder than any words could. They were no longer substandard. They had never been substandard. They had been underestimated, and the galaxy had learned, painfully, what that meant. And as humanity quietly returned to Earth, preparing for the next challenge, the galaxy understood one unshakable truth. Underestimate humans at your own peril. After the decisive victory against the hostile forces, humanity returned to its own space quietly, without fanfare or celebration. The battle had proven what they were capable of, and yet there was no need for public display. Humans had learned a lesson long ago. True power is not measured by how loudly it is announced, but by its effectiveness and precision. They had acted when it mattered most, and the galaxy had taken notice, even if reluctantly. Across the council chambers, panic, awe, and regret intertwined. Species that had once dismissed humans openly now whispered cautiously. Council leaders convened emergency sessions, trying to understand how they could have misjudged a species so completely. Every report, every observation, and every previous dismissal now appeared as a glaring failure in judgment. Their words declaring humans substandard echoed in their minds like a warning they had ignored. Minor species, who had quietly observed humanity's growth, began to recognize a new reality. Humans were no longer just another species on the galactic map. They had become a power to be respected, studied, and if necessary, feared. Stories of the battle, of human fleets maneuvering with precision, of technology and strategy that had turned the tide, spread quickly. Whispers became reports, reports became warnings, and soon the reputation of humanity had reached every corner of known space. Yet humans did not exploit this newfound recognition. They had no interest in dominating or humiliating the Council or other species. Their actions had always been guided by principle, strategy, and the protection of life. The insult that the Council had delivered years ago had become a catalyst, not for revenge, but for growth. Humanity had prepared, trained, and evolved quietly, allowing their actions to speak when the moment demanded it. Human leaders met in secure locations, reviewing the events and planning for the future. They understood that the Council would likely attempt to reassert control, to reestablish dominance, or to regain influence over human affairs. But humans had learned patience, strategy, and foresight. They were no longer dependent on the Council's approval, nor were they bound by its assumptions. Every plan, every technological advancement, every fleet deployment was now under their own authority. education and innovation on Earth continued unabated. Scientists, engineers, and strategists pushed the boundaries of what was possible. New technologies were developed to ensure preparedness for any challenge, no matter how unpredictable. Humans refined energy systems, propulsion technology, and defense mechanisms, ensuring that their capabilities would always exceed expectations. Every person on Earth, whether aware of it or not, contributed to this growth, creating a unified, resilient society. Council species tried to communicate with humanity, but their messages were met with measured responses. Humans were not hostile. They were cautious. They had learned that diplomacy and negotiation only worked when respect was mutual. Empty words or demands held no weight. The Council's credibility had been damaged, and humans were careful not to give it undue influence. Across the galaxy, humans' reputation grew as stories of their capabilities spread. Other species began to approach with caution, respect, or outright fear. Yet humans never sought to dominate or subjugate. Their goal had always been survival, mastery, and preparation. The insult of being called Substandard had taught them the importance of foresight, strategy, and patience. Humans understood that power wielded recklessly leads to destruction, but power applied with wisdom ensures stability, respect, and influence. Meanwhile, the Council faced internal turmoil. Their mistakes, visible to all, had exposed flaws in their judgment and leadership. Some species questioned their authority, while others began to study humans more carefully, realizing that underestimating a species capable of such strategy and innovation was a dangerous mistake. Whispers of doubt circulated in council chambers, accompanied by a growing awareness that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. Humanity continued its quiet growth. New fleets were built, more advanced than ever before. Strategic plans were updated, integrating lessons from every challenge faced. Cities and orbital stations thrived with innovation, research, and development. Every human, from scientists to pilots to ordinary citizens, contributed to a larger vision, a vision of a species capable of self-determination, protection, and influence without arrogance or unnecessary aggression. The Council, now fully aware of humans' capabilities, faced a choice. They could attempt to reassert control, risking further conflict, or they could acknowledge the truth. Humans were no longer substandard. They were a dominant, capable species, deserving of respect and careful consideration. Most council leaders chose cautious diplomacy, sending envoys to negotiate, learn, and understand. Yet even these interactions were met with human patience and measured strategy. Humans had learned the value of control, not just of fleets or technology, but of interactions and outcomes. Across the galaxy, the lesson was clear. Never underestimate humans. The species had been underestimated for centuries, labeled as weak or unpredictable. That mistake had given humanity the time, freedom, and motivation to grow quietly, methodically, and decisively. Now, when the galaxy looked at humans, they saw a species that was patient, strategic, disciplined, and incredibly capable a species, whose actions spoke louder than any words could. Humans themselves did not celebrate these victories with arrogance. They continued their work, their growth, and their preparation. Every fleet, every system, and every technological advancement was a testament to the patience and discipline they had cultivated. Their actions were deliberate, guided by foresight and purpose rather than emotion or ego. The insult they had received had become a foundation for resilience, innovation, and mastery. Minor species in the Council alike began to study humans more closely, trying to understand what had allowed them to achieve such mastery. Observers noted the balance between technology, strategy, and social cohesion, realizing that human strength was not just in their fleets or weapons, but in their discipline, adaptability, and unity. Humanity had transformed an insult into opportunity, underestimation into motivation, and invisibility into undeniable influence. As the galaxy adjusted to this new reality, humans remained focused on their own vision. They did not seek dominance for its own sake, but they had established a position of undeniable influence. Every action, every decision, every innovation reflected a species that had learned the value of patience, preparation, and precision. They had proven that power need not be loud, aggressive, or reckless to be absolute. In the council chambers, the term substandard became a cautionary tale. Leaders who had once scoffed at humans now approached with respect, careful to study, observe, and avoid mistakes. Humanity's rise was no longer a rumor or a whisper. It was an undeniable reality. The galaxy had learned that underestimating humans came at a cost that no species could afford to ignore. Back on Earth, humans continued to innovate, strategize, and prepare. Education, research, and training thrived, ensuring that every generation inherited the skills, discipline, and vision necessary to maintain their advantage. The species had learned the value of patience, and they knew that the galaxy would continue to test them. Yet humans were ready. Every challenge would be met with strategy, discipline, and precision, just as they had always been. By the end of this period, the galaxy had been permanently changed. Humans were no longer a minor species, a substandard entity to be overlooked or underestimated. They were masters of strategy, technology, and coordination. They were patient, disciplined, and prepared. And most importantly, they had proven that the assumptions of others could never limit the potential of a species determined to grow, evolve, and act when the moment demanded it. The insult from the council, which once seemed like a minor slight, had become the catalyst for humanity's transformation. It had motivated, inspired, and shaped a species that could act decisively and effectively when the galaxy needed it most. The lesson was simple, yet profound. Underestimate humanity at your peril. And as Earth continued its quiet work, preparing for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, the galaxy understood one undeniable truth. Humans were no longer substandard. They had never been substandard. They were patient, strategic, disciplined, and unstoppable when they chose to act. And that truth would resonate across the stars for generations to come.